Hello, my name's Rajinder Dudrah. I'm Professor of Cultural Studies and Creative Industries at Birmingham City University. I also lead the research project Slanguages, Languages in the Creative Economy. Slanguages is part of the wider project Creative Multilingualism, which is led by the University of Oxford, and I'm one of the key researchers on that project and one of the co-investigators. Now, as researchers, particularly when we're doing funded research, we're always asked about the impact of our work. A lot of us do research, and rightly so. When we receive research grants or get funded money, then in what ways is our research going back into the communities that we're researching or working with? How is it changing lives for the better, or how is it furthering knowledge? But in another sense, impact has also kind of got these negative connotations that somehow it has to be measured and it has to be cited. And for some of us as academics, as researchers, that can be a little bit daunting, but also particularly those of us who work in the arts and humanities, we'd like to think that impact isn't just a simple citation, it isn't just a figure or a number, but it's certainly complex, it can be nuanced, and it can work in ebbs and flows, and it can certainly work over a period of time, from when the research was first done to later on, weeks, months, years later. Particularly with some of us are working with artists, that research that we did in year one, it could be like a seed which takes time to germinate, then blossom, and then flower. So we're talking literally, months and years, as I said. So on Slanguages, I've had the immense privilege and wonderful challenges along the way, and some wonderful possibilities of working with a range of artists. And in this podcast, there's just really a selection of 7 artists in this podcast, and we've been working together to think about the ways in which we use languages, different kinds of languages, alongside English, but particularly non-Western languages, and how those languages interact and articulate with our artistic forms, our artistic genres, whether that be poetry, theatre, music, visual illustration, and so forth. Now, impact is a strange word, I suppose, particularly if you're trying to say, how can you capture the relevance, the importance, the contribution of your research? So for me, it always conjures up these ideas of kind of, physical impact, coming into contact with others, and, how can you measure it? So what we tried to do in this podcast really was to allow the artists to speak for themselves. I set them a series of loose questions based on our experiences over the past 4 years. Slanguages was a 4-year project as part of Creative Multilingualism. And it was really to allow them to speak about the journeys that the artists have been on, both in terms of one starting with the project, where they were in terms of their own artistic practices, where they were in terms of the kinds of languages that they might be using or might not be using. They might have just been using 1 or 2 languages, and then hopefully over the course of our interaction, a few of the artists certainly used 2, 3, 4, possibly even more languages. And so this podcast was really an opportunity for the artists to speak for themselves and narrate a bit about the journey that they've been on, to tell us a bit about their project, and in their own words to talk about impact. And here, I think one useful definition of impact, particularly by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, is the impact that your research can have in terms of social, cultural, well-being, physical, as well as the economic as well. These are factors or indices by which you could measure impact. But I didn't want to be just confined by those, so I literally wanted to just allow the artists to tell their story and for them to think about the kinds of impact, if any, that they feel they've had in terms of their own development, their thinking, their creativity, their language uses, their language learning, as a result of these wonderful partnerships that we had together over the last few years as a result of Slanguages and Creative Multilingualism. So I hope that this podcast is an insight into the kinds of research that we've been doing, the artists telling their own stories, and more importantly, the wonderful benefits and uses of doing arts and humanities research, which allows us to think, grow and develop, as well as then to also think about what is impact and how might we capture it or think about it. So in some senses, this podcast is about impact, but also it's about much more than that. It's about the stories, the journeys we went on together through a collaborative process, a process of working together, asking research questions, thinking about languages, allowing languages to meet each other, allowing languages to meet with the languages of the genres within which the artists were working. So for example, Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu in spoken spoken word, Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu in the animated context and so forth. And I hope this podcast is a useful way and a nice way for us to think about what is impact, how do we capture it, how do we think about it, but more importantly, to note and record and celebrate the wonderful artistic work that goes on in the arts and humanities as well. This podcast was also recorded and produced during May and June 2020. This was a very interesting, very challenging and in some senses disturbing time. The COVID-19 pandemic is spreading and working its way right across the world. And obviously this has meant that a lot of us have had to self-isolate or be distanced from each other. This has particularly been the case for our artists and some of our end projects. Some of these end projects we wanted to take out into the public realm, share with others, and disseminate as far and wide as possible through human interaction in close proximity, but clearly that wasn't possible. So this podcast has been recorded using social distancing measures by inviting and encouraging the artists to contribute and reflect. And Rebekah and Darryl have done a wonderful job of crafting and creating this as a piece which we share with you.
Please introduce yourself. Okay, cool. My name is Ashlee Elizabeth-Lolo. I am a writer, radio presenter and facilitator from Birmingham. My role on the Slanguages project is that of a poet and a playwright. I've worked on 2 projects so far with Slanguages. The first project was called Between the Rocks, which was an explorative piece about my relationship with my grandmother and also with her culture as a Jamaican diaspora within the UK. The second piece is called Jugni, which is a piece that explores Punjabi culture and also the Caribbean culture through the lens of females within the UK space and how we have fought to keep our identity alive throughout the histories and how we fought to keep the female narrative of history alive as well. So the main languages used in both pieces are Patwa, Punjabi, there's also Hindi, Yoruba, Twi, all sort of merged together to make the languages that we know of today. Different languages are important in my work because I think it's a connection to the past. I think etymology is just one example of how you can see how life influences language and language influences art. I think it's definitely something that I utilize a lot within my work, especially when I'm exploring my history as a Jamaican woman and exploring the language that my nan used, exploring how it's now being used in current culture and how it's going to be used in the future. So I think it's a very integral part of creating art. It's in a way a vessel to tell a story and it's so expressive. It's a beautiful way that we can explore our stories. 3 things that I've learned on my journey with Slanguages. First thing I can think of is researching thoroughly before you make a piece and whilst you're making the piece as well. Research can unearth so many different truths that you can incorporate into your art. It also merging it with hardcore fact or with historical data, I think definitely strengthens the credibility of your work as well. Probably the second point I would say is to not be afraid to use your language that you grew up with in your work. At the point where I made Between the Rocks, I just recently lost my grandmother and I was trying to hold on to my culture because I kind of saw my culture through her. So to not have her physically there was quite heartbreaking, but then also to explore her through her language was therapy, but also merging it into the art as well was just such a beautiful process. It's healing to the body and to the mind. Third point I would say is the beauty of working with other artists. I think a lot of the time artists work on their own and it can be quite an isolating process. But I think working with Rupinder and Ravita on this project, it's definitely given me a whole new perspective on collaborative work and how much richness you can get from bouncing your ideas off other artists, merging your culture with theirs to create art, an experience that I think I'm going to definitely carry through with me into the future. Working with Rajinder, it's been life-changing. From the moment we met, I knew that this was going to be such a creative, loving journey. Having him as a mentor has just been such a enriching experience. I don't know where I'd be without him. He's amazing. How has COVID-19 impacted your project's work in any way? I think COVID is obviously a very devastating thing for a lot of artists. I was very worried at first what was going to happen with the project that we're doing with Slanguages at the moment, but it actually hasn't changed as much as I thought it was going to. We're still collaborating online, practicing via Zoom. We're still in the process of making Jugni. And if anything, actually, it's made it stronger because I think we're learning more about our process of how to write as a collaborative team. It's still coming back. It's happening in 2021. It's just that we've had to rise to the occasion, try to thrive in uncertain and very complicated situations, but we are still moving forward. There are many things that I've learned on Slanguages that I would love to expand on and grow in the future. The biggest one is the fact that you can merge art with academia and you can do it very creatively. That barrier in my mind completely removed now. The future of my artistry could be very great. These societal issues that could be merged in, linking that with academic research and then presenting it in an artistic way. I think it could educate so many people across the country, across the world. It's definitely given me ideas for projects that I would like to execute in the future for artists that are younger than me. A platform that I'd like to give them where they could explore their heritage and their language and also merge it back into their art. Ooh, if money was not an issue and we could do anything in the world to publish the work that we've done in a literary sense as a hard copy book would be incredible, because it's then taking it into a different medium altogether. Yeah, I also think as well it could inspire another generation to read these plays and these monologues and these spoken word pieces that have been created, and to also feel like they could also achieve this. It's not out of the realms of possibility. It'd be an unlimited budget, an unlimited publishing party. It would be brilliant. So, quick fire questions and answers. So, creativity, God. God is a massive source of my creativity and inspiration. Multilingualism, heritage and history. Culture, grandmother. Identity, yet to be defined. Creative industries, unstable but always worth it. Communication, Gemini. I think I definitely embody a Gemini very well in everything that I do. The arts and humanities, a staple in education and should definitely get more funding. Slang or Slanguages, Aston. A lot of the slang that I grew up with originated in certain parts of inner city Birmingham, Aston being one of them. So it's something that we used when we was in school. So Aston, yes, definitely. Stories or storytelling, Vikings. I admire the way the Vikings preserved their histories through oral storytelling. In 3 to 4 words, what skills have you developed as a result of being part of Slanguages? Confidence, artistic integrity, freedom, because sometimes you can feel like you're being trapped by your own art and by the pressures of the industry. Being a griot, which is a West African storyteller who travels and promotes their histories through their art. So I definitely think Slanguages has turned me into a griot. I am very grateful for all these skills that I have inherited through the Slanguages project.
Hi, my name is Rupinder. I'm from Birmingham and I am a writer, performer and creative curator. I've had the pleasure of working with Slanguages on 2 different projects. The first project being Sada Chiriyan Da Chamba, exploring Punjabi wedding folk songs through the female narrative. A lot of these songs, which date back to medieval Punjab, expressed how women really felt, as they were unable to express in words how they would feel. So they would sing in all women gatherings and dance to express themselves as a creative outlet. And these songs have many different dialects, such as Majhi, Malwai, Doabi, even the hybrid accent of Haryana and Punjab, to accents in Pakistan, Punjab, Mirpuri and Siriki. So in the folk song itself, the title, Sada Chiriyan Da Chamba, which follows as Sada Chiriyan Da Chamba, Ve Babala, Asa Urjana, which translates to, our temporary nest of birds, O Father, we will fly away. So Asa is now rarely used in India, Punjab, but it's still used in Pakistan, Punjab, which is what I find very interesting, how the same language can have so many different dialects for just the same word. I also held workshops with various different women to explore the folk songs in greater detail, critically think about them, and also to get a response in the form of a poem or monologue. I also held a Gidda workshop to see the folk songs in live action, how they are supposed to be with Gidda. The aim of this project was an exhibition, photographs, items and audio and the poems, all my research collated together. The second project, Jugni, which was actually inspired from one of my poems in my poetry book, Ru, is a project led by myself and two other artists, Ravita Banga and Ashlee Roberts, exploring the Asian and Black woman experience through history, using a range of languages from Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu to Patwa, which will be presented as a three-woman theatrical performance. Languages are vital in my work as a writer and performer. There are words that have now become lost, along with the essence of mother tongues in general. 2-3 generations into the diaspora, many are not so concerned with their mother tongues, which is why I tend to create fusion and hybrid pieces of work seen in Jugni, for example. Working with Slanguages has really made me value language, especially when I was invited to talk about Punjabi poetry at Oxford University, part of the event bringing Russian and Punjabi to British stages, to a recent Slanguages conference where I was invited to talk about languages and dialects in my work and how students can do this in classrooms. I suggested that students should read work from local poets. For example, Liz Berry uses the Black Country dialect in her poetry, to identifying what key languages are spoken by other students and work with translators. This particular conference has made me think about future plans to work in schools to facilitate poetry workshops, exploring mother tongues and languages. Working with Professor Rajinder has been a joyful experience that I've learnt and developed so much as an artist. In his facilitation, it has strengthened my ideas of taking languages to another level in my work in different mediums to experiment. COVID-19 has pushed the performance of Jugni to next year, along with the exhibition of Sada Chiriyan Da Chamba, but I'm hoping to create an online exhibition in the meantime. Along with the work that I've done with Slanguages, I hope to work on my skills as a creative curator and continue to work with the range of languages within the South Asian subcontinent, along with doing more workshops exploring Punjabi poetry critically, such as decolonising mother tongues at Literature Must Fall. I think if I had more time and more budget, I would have really liked to create audio pieces or video pieces experimenting with languages within South Asia, or perhaps even global languages such as Russian and Polish, translating bits of Jugni. I think that would have been really interesting. So, for example, these are a few lines from Jugni. The Jugni becomes me. We are travelling through the pages of history. So in Punjabi, this would have been something like, मैं जुगनी बांधी जांदी हाँ, असी इतिहास दे पन्नियां तो सफर कर रहे हाँ. I just think it would have been really interesting to see how a complete play would sound in Punjabi, how would the same play then sound in Polish, Hindi. It would have been really interesting to see. So I think perhaps in the future that's something that I would like to work on. So creativity, freedom of expression, freedom of the soul, translated in art, multilingualism, multi-languages, dialects, all coming together, culture, something that you can adapt, something that can be changed as you want, identity, the one thing that is yours completely, it is your uniqueness, communication, the way you speak, the way language can be silenced as well. Creative industries enable you to work as an artist and develop. The arts and humanities are two sisters that work together to deliver the finest work. Slanguages, language doesn't have to be perfect, it's the way that you use it. Storytelling, stories, the most important thing that artists can do is give voice to those stories hiding away. My skills developed critically thinking, mindfulness, new experiences of languages, value and strength in mother tongues.
Hello, my name is Lekan Babalola. I am a musician and producer and a curator. My role in the Slanguages project is the Yoruba sonnet. I conceptualized the idea, I wrote it, and I produced it with fellow artist Dr. Olutaiwo as a poet and also wonderful musician, composer, and the musical director for the project, Miss Kate Luxmore, and other musicians. The project title is Yoruba Sonnet, part of the Slanguages project at Wolfson College, part of the University of Oxford. The project is translating the sacred text, my language, Yoruba language from southwest Nigeria. So it went through the stages of discussion about what is Yoruba culture and its relationship to English culture, because Yoruba people live in southwest of Nigeria. And of course, we are English colony, but the culture of England is supposed to be the mother culture. But the two culture doesn't really know each other. So it's like the mother doesn't know the child. So in order for a relationship to happen, we had to bring the sacred text of the Yoruba culture into English language over different kind of music, which is jazz, folk, song, funk, hip-hop, grime, blues, soul, gospel. So different kinds of music. It's a teamwork working with various English people, Black British, Jewish British, Indian, different musicians, Caribbean, and how we all live in this multicultural society and how we use one language to use as a thread to share the meaning of what it means in different cultures. I thank Professor Rajinder very much. Collaborating with him, it makes you think about what you are doing. So it gradually takes the project into another realm that is very family-oriented. He knows how to use the project to expand it and whereby the project continue to flow. Has the COVID-19 situation impact on my project in any way? Yes, it has, because we are live musicians. We do composition at home in our various studios, but at the same time, we take the music out to the people, workshop and local school young people. So we do projects with our language. So it's like a cross-culture and interdisciplinary. COVID-19 has really affected it, but at the same time, we're devising another digital way of using Zoom to work, and we're going to start the Birmingham Jazz Radio Station, broadcasting different kind of music that you will find in Birmingham. So the station is going to happen this year. Well, it's an ongoing thing, working in partnership with Rajinder. We have a project called Bollian that feature Indian and also Nigerian artists like myself, whereby we're going to use Yoruba language and Hindu to create a theater piece which can become a radio play and also performing live. We just hope to have more budget. Slanguages project for me, since I've come to England, is an opportunity. Professor Rajinder, he gave people like me opportunity to have a voice, that it's okay to think in your language and be able to get help to translate it to the British community. Well, creativity, I'm an artist. I will always create in language, which is Yoruba, Pidgin, and English, because I have access to all this culture. And it creates a very good identity for creative industry to communicate what the other culture, non-English, is doing. And it helps the development of the arts and humanities with different slang and languages that becomes a new thing, like what the street kids will say, you get me. And through that, they'll be able to tell their stories, storytelling, either through music, visual arts, film, animation. They can disseminate it to the world. I've developed, I can say I'm a cultural curator for Slanguages who's using different culture put together to create a new art form. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this. Thank you. My name is Lekan Babalola.
Hi, my name is Nick Drew and I'm a graphic designer with a background in exhibition design and museum services. I currently work for myself, where I produce a range of static and touring exhibitions, publicity and promotional material. Over the last few years I've been working on Slanguages as part of a team working with Punch Records in Birmingham and Professor Rajinder Dudrah. We've worked on and created a travelling exhibition which looks at a range of language styles used by a selection of some of the incredible artists in Birmingham, and it looks at the very different ways they express themselves in their art. Specifically, we've looked at artists with a range of different voices, featuring urban sign language with a deaf and hard of hearing stand-up comedian, a Grammy Award-winning percussionist performing with his amazing talking drums, a grime artist and MC who engages in local and global issues, and a spoken word artist who uses a range of patois and imagery to tell very personal life stories. All of these artists use different language styles to communicate in their work. For me, this has been an exciting experience to find ways to deliver an exhibition showcasing such diverse forms of communication and storytelling. One of the first issues with the exhibition we created was that it would have to travel to different venues, for the most part be unsupervised. All the venues were different, and as other venues came online after the initial exhibition structures were produced, it all had to be designed to be completely adaptable and fit any space. Working within the team was great fun. Everyone was very creative, coming up with all sorts of clever and imaginative ideas to showcase and demonstrate these amazing artists. We selected a range of ways that we could talk about the artists, their backstory if you like, and the impact it has on people today. It was a great experience for me personally, but the best thing for me was actually showcasing the artist at the openings and letting people actually see and hear the different voices as they took centre stage. Currently, with the coronavirus situation, the next exhibition in the project has been postponed, which is a shame as it is all ready to install now, though we have been looking at adding other local artists and featuring very different ways to tell a story. It was always our intention to add other new local artist performers, and we wanted to include dance and movement and coding, which is a fascinating language in its own right. We're now looking at moving information online to carry the artist experience further, which is exciting and something to look out for shortly. I think if time and budget was limitless, I would have loved to see the exhibition move into a different format that can reach out to a wider community. I had the idea for an exhibition in a bus that can drive from venue to venue. Imagine that turning up at a school or college where students could walk through the bus and through the use of different techniques and mediums, discover all these different languages, different ways of communicating, and recognise that talking is just one of many ways to get a story across. So, what do the following keywords mean for me? Creativity, well, it's what I do. Multilingualism is getting the message across. Identity, who I am or who am I? Creative industries is my passion to work in. Communication, how do I get the message across? The arts and humanities, it's what keeps me going. Slang or slanguages? I love it. I love when words come together to make a new word. Stories or storytelling. We all have stories, but when do we get to tell them? What skills have you developed as a result of being part of Slanguages? Well, partnership, coming together to work together, communication, putting heads together to make things work, and learning. How fascinating is language? When you look into it, every movement, every look or sigh is telling a unique story. It is written large all over us. The impact for me has been the recognition of how many different types of communication there are that I'm totally unaware of. With Slanguages, I was surprised by how others use language to convey their message. Who knew that there was a slang sign language? And when you see it performed, how cool is it? I think for me in the future, I need to listen to other people's voices more and take into account their personality and backstory. It's easy for me to put my spin on their story in the design process. Much harder to work collaboratively and work with someone to see things from their perspective. It's not my story after all.
Hello, my name is Noah Birkstead-Breen. I am the postdoctoral research associate on Creative Multilingualism, a project led by Oxford, and I'm also artistic director of Sputnik Theatre Company, a theatre company bringing contemporary Russian plays to UK stages. I am now recording from my local community garden in Hackney, where I live. I've been working on a project called VAM. It's written by and performed by Lady Sanity and Stanza Divan, two Midlands-based hip-hop artists who are writing a documentary hip-hop drama about their lives, fictionalised, but nevertheless telling the real stories of how they have overcome prejudice and other obstacles to become recognised hip-hop artists in the UK.
Yes. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill. But it comes in like man's death nowadays. Lost in streams and audio plays. See, I knew a man stuck in those same ways, and he switched up his cards. took a life for Dre.
The languages used in FAM are Black British dialect, which is the language they use in their hip-hop anyway, and also patois. Their grandparents are from the Caribbean, people of the Windrush generation who came over to the UK, and they've been interviewing their grandparents and weaving their real-life testimonies into the play. The play is being written at the moment, and we're looking at how to bring in other languages as well. Obviously, hip-hop is an urban music form that's used around the world, and there are many young artists in particular who are creating hip-hop in Russia, in Iran, as a form of resistance and self-expression. I've always been fascinated by different languages and cultures, and for anyone else who has been to another country and spoken another language, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say you feel very different in a different society, and even more so if you're speaking that other language. There are different cultural expectations which come with that language. So when I'm in Russia, I feel in some ways quite different. So when I come back to the UK, it gives me a fresh perspective on the culture here and the different cultures here. In this project was the idea of dialect, as I thought a lot about different languages, but I hadn't thought so much about dialects. At one point in the project, I was talking to Stanza. He described himself as being bilingual, and he was talking about Black British dialect. Hip-hop dialect sounds similar to English. And for him, he felt that those two were separate enough to call himself bilingual. So he grew up in a disadvantaged area in West London, in a predominantly black community, and he went to school in a predominantly white and advantaged part of West London. And he learnt to navigate both communities, and that's why he could think of himself as being bilingual. So it's very important in terms of heritage, being able to reflect upon that. The single biggest impact on my work from Slanguages has been working across disciplinary boundaries, and working with Rajinder has been fantastic. So at the inaugural conference of Creative Multilingualism, he invited 3 grime artists to perform, and that was the seed of an idea for me. Their performance reminded me of a contemporary Russian play, so I made the suggestion, well, it would be fascinating if that play could be translated into Black British dialect, into urban music. It's really opened a new practice for me in that way. So the COVID-19 pandemic has had a big impact on us, because we were planning to do a live performance of FAM in June this year. So we've decided instead to do an online performance, which is very exciting. It gives us a chance to reach out to different groups of people. We still hope at a later date to do a live performance, and we hope to do some sort of national tour as well. So the skills and experiences that I've acquired from Slanguages will definitely shape my practice and the way I work in the future. For example, collaborating with urban music artists is something I would now like to do again. I've never done an online performance. That was not planned. I think it will allow the work to reach different audiences to the ones I normally reach. I think the challenge for Slanguages is to use the resources it has and to tap into the brilliant work that it's done and the fantastic artists it has worked with, and in some way bring those artists to established theatre companies and venues. So the last question I'll answer about culture. Последний вопрос о культуре. Да, это, конечно, очень важно. That's very important. Creativity, I suppose I want to mention in terms of my deep belief that we're all creative. And in terms of diversity in culture, it's important not simply to have an equality of opportunity. Diversity brings different ideas, different ideologies, different philosophies, different ways of seeing the world. And at this point in time, that feels very important. With the choppy waters we've got ahead, both with the pandemic and Brexit in a very divided country, it's really important to try to understand others who don't look like us and don't speak like us. I think once you can empathise with others across sort of constructed social boundaries, that at least gives some hope of a more healthy society.
I'm Rebekah Tolley-Georgiou.
And I'm Darryl Georgiou.
We're artists, filmmakers and educators, and we collaborate as Georgiou and Tolley.
And we also make collaborative art projects under the umbrella of Arts Lab International.
Our project is Hinterland Sound and Picture Poems.
Hinterland.
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 Andrune mol.
And hinterland means many things.
Hinterland consists of new contemporary artworks made in response to Darryl's personal photographic film, sound and image archive.
Exploring the idea of history and archive as cultural memory. Called Mercia B21, which largely documents the English Midlands, with 5,000 analogue photo images and hundreds of hours of cine-film captured in old Mercia.
So experiments for Hinterland were made by renegotiating the image archive through a contemporary cut, copy and remix approach to create examples of untranslatability where image, sound and text collide.
More lastly, comprising of a long-form radio film or an audiovisual sound collage. Hinterland, a project to fill the holes in language and visualise something when language isn't quite enough.
Ultimately reflecting on the way that we live today. An example of which would be Talking Trifle, a language game of sorts in the form of an animation based on a menu board, consisting of very British 1970s dishes, pork pies, trifle. Culturally, it means different things to different people. The common query, what is trifle, is a perfect example of the slippage between languages. And to set a context, because context is half the work. Well, we looked at those lexical gaps and highlighted something as innocuous and traditional as a British dessert.
Why are different languages important to us in this project? Our wider research develops alternative communication systems, coded languages, pictographic, ideographic, signed or performed, signs and symbols, a speechless language, otherwise known as art.
Languages included Punjabi, South Korean, German, Polish, Portuguese, Danish, Arabic, French, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Gujarati, Hindi, Patois and Somali. Some of the things that we've learnt and developed on this project in terms of impact are...
It's definitely helped us develop our professional practice.
When we started the Hinterland project, our ambition was to develop an outward-facing project.
Hinterland for us is important because it all starts and ends with visual language. The point being for us that we're interested in where and how things connect, change and transform. Hinterland, thanks to Professor Dudrah, has allowed us to join the dots
and create cross-platform stories. We're interested in where and how things connect, change and transform.
What was it like collaborating with Rajinder Dudrah on Slanguages?
It was a very productive collaboration and rewarding. Ultimately, it was a transformative exchange of art and language ideas. How has the COVID situation impacted on our project? We moved from the physical to the virtual, and ultimately our socially engaged practice became socially distanced practice.
Virtual.
Strangely, it's allowed us to connect with participants in a much more rewarding and direct way, and also develop a much larger and inclusive audience through digital radio broadcasts and content platforms such as Mixcloud, much more than we would have done via conventional exhibitions, publications or talks. It's online, but through increasingly social media. We hope to develop the skills and experiences that we've acquired during this Slanguages project by locating and renegotiating the post-lockdown hinterland and looking for modest ways of rewilding our culture and hinterland project post-quarantine.
If time and budget were limitless, how would we develop the project?
Ideally, we would have been able to physically gather all of the participants, but the lockdown has meant that we've had to collaborate virtually and digitally at a social distance. We started the project by breaking bread and talking together, and it would be nice to end it that way one day.
Here's some keywords.
Creativity, imagination and ideas to reimagine and create something new. Multilingualism, cross-cultural encounters. Image, word, sound. Art as the untranslatable. A trilingualism or trifle-lingualism in this case. Culture. Art and ideas, our collective culture. Identity, who or what we can potentially be as opposed to what we are or labelled as now. Creative industries, where creativity can visibly impact economically on society in a way that can be measured or understood by those outside the arts. Communication, an exchange of meaning. We're interested in the gap and slippage of that information, verbal, non-verbal, written and visual communication. The arts and humanities, its culture and all the transformative possibilities that come from that. slang or slanguages. For us, it's cross-cultural encounters and the untranslatable, sometimes visual slanguages. Stories or storytelling. We're sharing stories originating from a personal photo or image archive, exchanging our regional experiences with others, participants, and listening to other people's international stories, collaborating and hopefully reanimating and renegotiating a more collective memory in the process. In 3 or 4 keywords, what skills have we developed as a result of being part of Slanguages? Utilising that's missing and being able to locate the untranslatable. Making art as a language, when language isn't quite enough. Listening and hearing as a language within itself. Communication as food or trifle making. Hinterland is important because it all starts and ends with visual language.
My name's Nathaniel Telemaque. I am a visual artist. I'm from London and I worked on the Slanguages project titled Sounds Like Harsden.
We are the longest liver and we shall be here with all what's going on. We're gonna remain.
Audiovisual essay that basically combined my personal photography taken on 35mm film and Polaroids with soundscapes and recordings of different locals in the Harsden area in northwest London, and basically the project looked at visualising Harsden and different aspects of Harsden and the communities and the linguistic backgrounds. Sounds Like Harsden was made in collaboration with Sakina Hudson and Kalina Blaze, who are part of my arts collective, Peso Life, Visual Arts and Records. And with Sounds Like Harsden, it was a collaboration where the 3 of us came together. I kind of handled the visuals, Sakina and Kalina Blaze responded to those visuals, created soundscapes and recordings that I also provided with them. I also got in contact with different locals to get their perspectives of the area and their experiences, as well as their cultural or linguistic takes, if you would, on how to describe or characterize Harsden or what it meant to them. We had German, Gujarati, Somali, Patois and normal kind of London-based slang, if you would, as the key languages that were involved in the project. I'm currently working on a photo essay as part of an extension of Sounds Like Harsden. It's going to be called Neighbourhoods, and we're using Polaroid photographs, engaging with people and the urban landscapes, twisting that into a written/visual narrative. The different languages, the ones that were very important to me relative to the project, probably Somali and Gujarati. Those are 2 really good ones that we featured in Sounds Like Harsden, and we had really good extensive engagements with those 2 languages. And moving forward, languages that I'm interested in engaging with are probably Igbo, Nigerian. It's a language I'm familiar with, again, locally, because Brent is very diverse. Portuguese would really be good as well. It's pertaining to the Brazilian population in northwest London. And Filipino. They're kind of a elusive community in northwest, I guess. This project impacts the way I worked in a manner that it allowed me to kind of practice the pragmatics of good organisation, getting organised with the dates and knowing when I was going to do my research and development, and bouncing back with drafts with Rajinder, which was great. He was very supportive and offered a lot of good support in regards to ethics and considerations, because it kind of made me reflect on the impact that I would have with the people that I'm working with. In regards to developing my professional practice or ideas in any way for the future, it was a big thing. The way I met Rajinder and the way the project was commissioned and the way I was able to share that commissioning with my creative contemporaries, of looking around my neighbourhood, doing it for the people, but at the same time as part of a research/creative practice, was really interesting. That I was able to see the best in all worlds. Imagine overlapping Olympic circles. So we have like the research, the creative, the local, and I kind of feel like Sounds Like Harsden was able to sit in the middle. If I'm going to be very honest, socially this is great because the project, again, it allowed me to be, I won't say a social butterfly, but met a lot of people who I normally wouldn't. Culturally, it's just great to be able to contribute to my local neighbourhood, my local area, and to do something that speaks to the area in a way that doesn't kind of speak to all the territorial stigma that it normally gets associated with. I was commissioned for the project, which is great, and I'm very grateful for it, as well as my contemporaries. Again, finding, as an artist, like I say, especially now in this new normal of COVID-19, finding commissioned work isn't an easy job. been lucky to have met Rajinder, and again for it to have happened so organically with Slanguages to kind of fit the type of creative practice that I was already doing, because Rajinder was very supportive throughout from beginning to end, very understanding. It was a pleasure to work with him. Rajinder came down to London to watch the screening, which was amazing to have him there. I look forward to working with him in the future. Has the COVID situation impacted on your project's work in any way? I had maybe 4 or 5 different shoots, visual projects that I wanted to start. Just the restrictions on my movement alone is creatively stagnant. Sounds Like Harsden luckily was released prior to this happening in transition to the lockdown. It hasn't stopped, but as far as pushing it out and getting more people to see it, I've had to bench those ideas until the new normal has adjusted and people can get out. The skills like the pragmatic things like time organisation and planning, I can definitely kind of use. Sounds Like Harsden can be applied to my research in my PhD or other creative projects. If time and budget was limitless, I would essentially set out to do a longer audiovisual essay, more nuanced look into Harsden as an area. And essentially it would probably be a documentary natured project as opposed to a visual essay. Creativity, I'm not going to lie, I hate that. That's a buzzword for neoliberalism, but let's take that aside. Creativity is creative expressions. Multilingualism is a great one, and for me straight away it just means the diversity of languages. Culture, straight away, I think Notting Hill Carnival, funny enough, because as a young kid, the first attachment to culture I had was going to carnivals. So culture straight away, for some reason, Notting Hill Carnival. Identity straight away is who I am, where I am, how I am, why I am. Creative industries, that's the one that I was talking about, the neoliberal buzz term, like creative consultancy, branding, Nike, Adidas, all the kind of cringe things that make you kind of commodify your creative expression as opposed to enjoy your creative expression. Communication, we live in an internet age, Web 2.0 platforms, social networks, the arts and the humanities, fun section of research and of the social sciences. Slang and Slanguages, when I heard Slanguages, I was like, this is a different project. Slang is like a dirty word for me. I was told off for saying things like in it, and Slanguages being like something actually credible and official. Stories and storytelling straight away is like self-published prose, writing, zines. I love stories and storytelling. And in 3 to 4 words, what skills have you developed as a result of being part of Slanguages? Straight off the top, visual arts, synthesis, so synthesizing visual arts and music production. Vernaculars, kind of engaging with the different vernaculars of other languages, or the different sounds or different ways people could say and talk in one language is really interesting.
As I said, this is just a snapshot of some of the research. We've done lots of research across creative multilingualism and particularly in Slanguages. And here there's literally, several projects which have been talked about. Other projects can be found on the Creative Multilingualism website and particularly on the Slanguages page. So that's creativeml.ox.ac.uk/Slanguages, or Slanguages can be found quite easily by typing into a search engine.
This has been the Slanguages Impact Podcast. The Slanguages project is led by Professor Rajinder Dudrah, Birmingham City University, and is part of the Arts and Humanities Research Council Creative Multilingualism project based at the University of Oxford. Music tracks featured in the podcast are Bowl by Roseart from Handsworth, Birmingham, Roseart_producer on Instagram, and A Word is Worth 1,000 Pictures by Bonsa, Creative Commons Attribution. You're listening to an Arts Lab International production by Giorgio and Tolly.